Hi, I'm Connie Jackson, and welcome to Real Talk with the Legends. I am so excited to have our guest, Donnie Sellers. Donnie, I tell you, it's really great to have you here today. And you've done so many things. But, we could talk about the gold records, platinum records, and all the things you've done in the industry, and we will get to that. But I'd like to start out talking about Camden. You're from Camden.
All my life.
And this is where, I like to say, this is where the legends reign. So tell me about Camden and how you really began to love music and when that started.
Well, thank you for having me, first of all. It started years ago. If I have to put a number on it, I guess I cannot start in the 60s.
Okay.
But I was a young man, and I was intrigued by people who could play music.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, as I stated earlier, you and I, when we were just talking in general, Leon Huff was the first music artist that I really got a chance to see play.
Okay.
And I started from there.
Okay.
Something I didn't mention to you,
Mm-hmm.
now that I think about it, it was a group called the Fiestas
Ah.
and a song called So Fine.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Mr. Ingalls,
Mm-hmm.
who was from Camden,
Okay.
he joined up with the group while they were in New York.
Right.
His son, his name was Teddy Ingalls.
Okay.
One day they were practicing over at the Bates, and we lived in the manor in the projects.
Right.
And their house was right outside my back door.
Right.
Well, the Fiestas were over there practicing.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the very first time that I got to see a group perform live
Okay.
in practice.
Okay.
And I was intrigued, and that's where it began. I just didn't
Okay.
know it would
Well,
begin.
I'm going to take you back a little further than that.
Okay.
And that's at Hatch Middle School.
Yeah.
So Hatch Middle School, and I went to Hatch Middle School too. But I know you went there before me. But Hatch Middle School, I'd like you to tell me about that experience with Mr. Mumford at Hatch Middle School.
Well, I was looking for something to do. I was walking the hall, and Mr. Mumford noticed that I was acting a darn fool. So he said, "Come over here." So I went to him, and he said, "Can you sing?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, I'm going to teach you." And he allowed me to join the glee club, and that's where it began.
Now, you met a lot of people, and those, as you said, are, icons to this day. But I remember you sharing with me about the first time you heard Leon Huff play in Centerville, because Leon Huff is from Camden as well. So tell me about how you heard Leon Huff play in Centerville.
Well, being from Centerville, the first thing that we all did as kids was learn how to swim. and we had the big pool across the street right off of Central Avenue. And there were a row of houses, because this was also in the projects in the manor.
Right.
And Leon was in the pantry playing the piano for a group called Patty and the Embrems, which was the first time I saw the group and the first time I saw Leon actually playing the piano.
Right.
Now, Leon also played the piano at the pool. A lot of people don't know, over top of the swimming pool, on the second floor,
Right.
there was a big ballroom,
Right.
which was big back in the early 40s, I believe. I wasn't around at that time.
Right.
So, but nonetheless, with this big ballroom that they actually went up there and utilized every now and then.
Right.
But Leon was playing in the pantry, to go back to that. And I was standing outside because a bunch of people had gathered, and we were listening and watching him play. And that was the first time I was introduced, not personally, to the group and to Leon.
Okay. And so you said Patty and the Emblems, and they were the ones I think you told me that did Mixed Up, Shook Up.
Mixed
Right?
Up, Shook Up Girl.
Mixed Up, Shook Up Girl.
That is correct.
Over you. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I remember that.
That
So
was
that
the
was
first
really
time.
cool.
Mhm.
That was really cool. And did you ever think at that time that, you would do some of the things that you came to do at that
Never.
time?
It was never a thought.
Okay.
I didn't get this notion to become a music person maybe 10, 15, 20 years after that. That's when I got involved.
Okay.
It was a friend of mine, and I have to mention it because he just recently passed. His name was Richard Snooky Jones.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Well, Snooky and I, we became friends, and one day we were sitting in this car and said, hey man, we could do what those guys are doing. And I was working for Campbell Soup Company, I have to bring that in. And I was looking to make a change in my career. And I think he was working for SEPTA,
Okay.
bus driver. And he was looking to make a change in his career. So we decided that we would go over to DAS in Philadelphia. And we went over there and started talking to people and telling them what we had an interest in.
Right.
And somehow or another, it led up to us going into promotions.
Okay. Okay.
And that's what happened.
All right. Well, take me to Broadway Eddies, though.
Okay.
Because Broadway Eddies, I mean, that was the place here in Camden. That was the record shop. Now, we had several record shops, but Broadway Eddies was one of the larger record shops where it's right there on the corner of Broadway and Mickle. And I used to go in there
Every day.
a lot, right?
Every day. Every day.
So tell me about Broadway Eddies and what you did when you went in there every day. I mean, what was the draw?
Well, the draw, I was intrigued by all the music and just thumbing through the albums. As I thumbed through them, you got a chance to see all the artwork, which a lot of people really don't, maybe the younger people today don't know. But there was great artwork on top of those covers where the music was. And as I thumbed through them, I'm looking at the artwork, and that became identification. You could identify the music and the artist just by looking through the artwork. And I used to do that every day, and Broadway Eddie noticed one day. He said, man, you always in here looking through these records like that. He said, you ought to be in the music business. And it was a spark. And then one day, as I was in there, my future boss came in. I didn't know he was my boss at that time, or would be.
Right.
He came into the record store, and Eddie said, look, I want to introduce you to somebody. And he introduced me to this gentleman named Richard Salvador. And we call him Richie for short. But Richie said, you interested in music? I said, yeah, I want to be one of them record guys. So he said, well, come to my office on Monday. This was on a Thursday.
Right.
He said, come to my office on Monday, be there at 9 o'clock, and we'll talk about it. Well, I went there, and I got there early. I got there a half hour early.
Right.
And he wasn't there. So
you thinking, is this guy for real?
yeah, well, that was my first thought.
Am I being punked?
And when I got there, like I said, he wasn't there.
Right.
And then maybe 5-10 minutes after I had gotten there, he came in. So he looked at me sitting in the lobby, kind of like said, what are you doing here? Excuse me. I said, what am I doing here? You told me to come here. He said, I did. I said, yeah. He said, well, what time I tell you? I said, you said 9 o'clock. He said, well, it's only quarter of. I said, yeah, I didn't want to be late. So he said, no, come back at 9. So,
Okay.
I really didn't know how to take it at that moment.
Right.
But 9 o'clock, I went back, and when he opened the door, he bust out laughing because he was punking me then, I guess. But he wound up hiring me, and that was my first gig in the record business.
Okay.
working for Schwartz Brothers.
And what did he hire you as?
As a promotion person.
Okay.
My job was to get the records played on the radio, which most people might think is easy, but that's a very difficult job.
Right.
Because you're dealing with a lot of competition.
Right.
And not only are you dealing with competition, you had to cipher through a lot of records to find out which one was compatible to that radio station.
So what was the process? You know, you had to get these records played, and you had to interface with, I guess, the record industry, the top folk who would determine whether or not they're going to play these records. I mean, who were they, and what was the process? What did you have to do?
Well, for most promotion people, it's to get it heard. That's step one.
Right.
Whoever could listen or whoever would listen was your audience, and that's what you wanted. And you wanted that because you needed the encouragement. Right. You needed the encouragement from just the average Joe Schmo, if you will. Listening to a song and say, hey man, I like that. Well, that was invigorating. And you took that and you took it to the next step, which was the DJs of all the radio stations. You tried to get them involved.
Right.
And then from the DJ, you would go to the music director. And from the music director to the program director. And try to go through the whole process of getting the records played.
Sure. So now, we're going to talk about the artists in a moment, but oftentimes you'd hear Payola, that you'd have to pay folk to get your record played. You have to pay the DJs or whoever's playing the record. I mean, have you ever experienced that whole issue and piece of Payola?
No, I've never experienced it personally.
Okay.
Now, as to whether or not it existed, I truly can't answer that question.
Okay.
But from my point of view, and the things that I had to deal with, that was never an issue. The people that I dealt with, the DJs, the music directors, program directors, it was all for the love of the music. Had nothing to do with money. They would listen to a song and they would make a determination as to whether or not this was a song that they could play.
Right.
And fortunately, my career and the careers of those people that I'm speaking on in the music business, they all made it their business to do it the right way.
Right.
And that was the right way.
Right.
I'd never had any involvement in Payola.
Right, right. So now this industry, would you say that this industry is dominated by white males? In this industry, oftentimes, you kind of see individuals who don't really look like us.
Well,
that's in the hierarchy of the industry, I'll say.
During my time, the early 70s, throughout the 80s, most of the 90s, I'd say yes. It was dealt with by mostly white males. That's on the higher end.
Right.
Now, I'm sure each one of those companies had people that they dealt with on another level. But on my level, yes, because it was so much more than just the music. Right. See, again, most people don't know, and I'm not taking anything away from them. They just don't know that it was a business. The music business was a business. And I mean a business in every aspect. There was nothing done in the industry that wasn't calculated. Right. Meaning they had departments that dealt specifically with whatever it is that they had to deal with. Most people don't know about the marketing department or the merchandising department or the sales department. I mean, each one of these places were businesses. Right. And they all were set up as a business, and we all came together, which made a conglomerate. Right. And that's how the labels became what they were.
Right. Now tell me some of the labels that you've worked with, and you did some A&R stuff as well, right?
Only from a perspective of a record promoter.
Okay.
The A&R was a department.
Okay.
You had people who gave their life for that. I mean,
Oh, wow.
that's what they did.
Right.
You know, they found groups and artists and went on and helped them become who they become.
Right.
Me as an A&R only became after they did what they done.
Okay.
I was more like a confirmant.
Okay.
You know, I said, yes, this is a hit. Now, they have already did everything that needed to be done. I was just the bottom line
Okay.
to say, yeah, I think I can get this played over the airwaves. And that's where we became A&R people.
Okay. So tell me about some of the gold and platinum records that you have, like Janet Jackson and Sting. and,
Yes.
you know, tell me about that. I mean, tell me about Janet Jackson. Let's talk about Janet Jackson.
Well, I started working with Janet when she was 12.
Wow.
Yeah, most people wouldn't know that.
12.
12. she had done an album.
Right.
I can't remember the name of the album, but I think the title was called Janet.
Okay.
That was the album. It
Right.
was just titled Janet.
Yeah.
And she was in the swimming pool. Here we go back to swimming. She was in the swimming pool.
Right.
And she had this orchid on the side of her hair. And she was 12 years old.
Wow.
And I can't remember the name of the single, but we worked that. And I worked it as an independent at the time. I was
Right.
not a representative of that record company.
Okay.
I was an independent
Right.
who saw the album and thought I could help.
Right.
And I was trying to promote it, and that became one of the first ones that I worked with on Janet.
Okay.
Now, of course, the next one that she did was the Control album.
Ah.
She was
Yeah.
no longer 12, she was 21.
Wow.
And that album lasted from, I think we started working on it in 1984 or 85.
Right.
And we worked that album until 1989.
Wow.
And then
Okay.
in 1990, she came out with Rhythm Nation.
Oh yeah.
So,
Yeah. Rhythm Nation was huge.
and Control actually, she sold about 10 million copies of that
Wow.
record.
Wow.
It started out, we didn't know exactly what was going on. And when I
Right.
say we, I'm talking about the whole structure.
Sure.
We didn't know exactly what was going to happen. But it started with Miss You Much.
Oh yeah. Wanna miss you much.
Yes. And then it went on and it kept going and kept going. And
Right.
next thing we know, we had 6 #1 singles out of that
Wow.
album.
Number one.
Number
Number
one.
two doesn't count.
Number two
one.
doesn't mean the same. Only when you're going down.
Right.
Yeah. But coming up, number 2 was not an issue.
Okay.
You had to go from wherever you were in the numbers game to number 1.
Right.
And if you didn't do that, you didn't do your job.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that was
Awesome. So you got, was that a platinum record that
it.
you have?
Yeah, that's a platinum.
Okay.
And then once you get to platinum, it becomes double platinum, triple
Wow.
platinum,
Wow.
quadruple platinum.
Wow.
You know, and keeps going. Each million that you
Right,
sell.
right.
And I believe we sold 10 million copies
Wow.
on that particular
Wow.
album.
And then you did Sting.
Yeah.
Right.
A very interesting guy. I was fortunate enough to be with him. We were walking, he and I, we were walking the streets of New York City, and we were on our way to a radio station called WBLS in
yeah.
New York.
Yeah. BLS. Yeah.
So he was going to do an interview at the radio station.
Right.
And as we were walking, he made reference to one of the songs that was on that album.
Right.
And the name of that song was An Englishman in New York. So
Okay.
just something I had to throw out there because
Right.
he's an Englishman
Right.
and we were in New York. So it was all good.
ironic.
How ironic. But it was all good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Sting is, he's the artist of artists.
Right.
Very down to earth, very much into his craft.
Right.
And it was a pleasure working with him.
Awesome. Now tell me about Barry White.
Well, the first time I met him, he came into the office and I said something crazy to him. I don't know what it was.
Right.
Something like, "Who's this big guy?" You know, it was
Big dude.
yeah, coming into my office. I have no,
Yeah.
who's this guy?
Right, right.
Knowing that I knew who it was,
Right,
but
right.
he caught up with the joke, and we became friends.
Right.
That day he said, he pointed at me, he said, "You
Right.
can no longer call me Barry White."
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at him, and I was a little taken back
Right.
because I didn't know how serious he was.
Right.
He said, "You can call me BW."
Mm.
And
Wow.
that became how our friendship grew.
Okay.
Yeah, he became
Okay.
BW and on from there.
Okay.
And
okay.
I have to tell this story.
Right.
We were at one of our music conventions in
Mm-hmm.
Atlanta, Georgia.
Right.
And it was the biggest music convention that we, as an industry,
Mm-hmm.
had.
Right.
And it was called Jack the Rapper.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, if you
That's
weren't
huge.
a part of Jack the Rapper, then you
Right.
truly wasn't a part of the record industry.
Right.
Well, I'm at the convention, and this array of people standing behind the red rope.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they got it roped off
Right.
as the red carpet comes into the. I think it was at the Marriott Hotel
Okay.
where we were having the convention that year, and as people will pull up in their limos, etc., almost like the Oscars, I guess.
Right.
Pull up in their limos, get out, and come strolling down the red carpet.
Sure.
Well, Barry pulled up, or BW, pulled up, and he's walking down the red carpet,
Right.
and I'm standing there amongst all these people.
Right.
How he saw me, I truly do not know.
Right.
But as he's walking up the red carpet, he looks up, and he saw me standing there, and
Right.
he came through the red rope, the velvet rope,
Right.
and gave me this big hug, pulled me out, gave me this big bear hug,
Right.
and said, "Donnie, my brother."
Wow.
And for me, was the moment of my life.
Wow.
Just to have him acknowledge me in this sea of people. I mean,
Sure.
I'm talking about the sea of people.
Oh yeah.
And for him to pick me out
Right.
and give me that hug in front of all these people was just the utmost.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's what it was to me.
Awesome,
Very
awesome.
awesome.
Well, you've done so many things, and you know, when I saw all the gold and platinum records that you had, I was like, wow. And this is Camden being represented. Has anyone ever told you that you look like somebody from the Whispers?
Yeah, I have.
Have they ever told you that?
Yes, I've been told that by a few people, including the Whispers themselves.
Okay.
There was Scotty and Walter.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one day we were over at DAS, WDAS,
Right.
and Butterball.
Mm-hmm.
We were sitting in Butterball's office. I was,
Right.
and Butter and a couple other people.
Right.
When this guy named Jack Wellman,
Mm-hmm.
rest his soul, he worked for Capitol Records at that time.
Right.
He's coming in with the Whispers.
Mm-hmm.
So as they're coming in, they pointed at me. The Whispers, this is Walter and Scotty.
Right.
They pointed at me, and I started smiling because they were on Capitol Records then.
Right.
But when I first met them, they were working for RCA. They were on Solar Records,
Okay.
which was distributed by RCA.
Okay.
And I worked for RCA, so I worked all those records before, and they remembered who I was.
Right.
So I wasn't the record promoter.
Right.
Again, this guy named Snooky Jones that I had mentioned before.
Right.
He was the record promoter,
Mhm.
but because I worked for RCA, I was also a promoter.
Okay.
So they come into Butter's office, and we're hugging, and most people didn't know who were in the office
Right.
that we knew each other that way.
Right.
So they hollering, "Donnie, Donnie," and I'm saying, "Yo," and we hugging. So when they started to leave after they did their interview with Butter,
Right.
one of them said, "Man, did anybody ever tell you that you could be one of the Whispers?" And then Scotty and Walter turned around
Right.
and said, "Y'all didn't know? He's the sixth Whisper." So from that moment on, I became an honorary Six Whisperer.
Wow.
And I mean, even to this day,
Right.
when they see me,
Right.
they remember that entire episode
Wow.
and say, yeah, he's a Six Whisperer.
Right.
That's the truth.
Wow. That is awesome. That is awesome. Well, you know, I am just so happy, honored that you could share this time to be able to just, you know, tell us some of your history, your journey, and just happy to know that you're here to tell it, because so many individuals have just either passed on, gone on, that's not here to actually tell their story. And so I'm glad that you could be here to tell us your story, tell us about your journey, and to share some of those things so that some of the younger folk, you know, can really know about what it is that you came through and that individuals came through years and years ago. Now everything is digital, whereas then you really had real albums and CDs and things like that you don't have today. That's historical, and the business has changed so much. It really was hands-on. So, I mean, we know that you and the work that you've done have paved the way for so many, and so we'd like to, you know, give honor where honor is due. So thank you for paving the way for so many of these young artists that are out here today that don't even know. So, Donnie?
Well, in closing, I'd like to say thank you for allowing me to speak and tell parts of my story. To have been in the music industry was such a deep pleasure. And I may not phrase that correctly, but for me it's correct. It was a deep pleasure being a part of the industry. I have to give props to all the fine folks at WDAS. And I only choose that one radio station because it's so close to here at home, Camden. Sure. And I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't mention WHAT and Power 99 and all those radio stations who supported me in helping make some of the music that I was able to promote, some of the finest music that we can reach back and listen to. Sure. I thank all those people. There are some who moved on, the Tony Browns of the world, the Cody Anderson, who was the general manager of WDAS, Butter. And I mention them because not only were they a part of what I did, they're a part of me as well. Right. They're family. And I love them all. And I just thank you again for allowing me to be able to exercise that thought.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And so we will see you again. Just great having Donnie Sellers here. And we'll see you again talking with the legends here in the city of Camden. This is where it started, right here in Camden. Yes. RCA.
Yes. There's one other thing before you close out.
Sure.
There was a radio station here in Camden.
That's right. WCAM.
WCAM Camden. And then right after that, it became WSSJ.
That's right.
Which was Gary Shepard.
Yes.
And Patty Jackson.
Yes.
A lot of people don't know that Patty had her start right here in Camden. Gary came from Detroit, if I remember correctly. And he started SSJ here in Camden. I don't know what happened or what became of the radio station, but nonetheless, I couldn't do an interview like this without mentioning. I met Jerry Blavitt at CAM. And Kay Williams. The legendary Kay Williams. Yes. He allowed me to come into the studio and sit with him years ago, and that's when I had an interest in being in radio. So I thought I had to bring that up.
Oh no, I'm glad you did. WCAM. I mean, they had the Camden school scene. They had, I mean, you know, there's just all kinds of things that individuals, if they really wanted to get into radio, that was the place where you could do that. And when I was in high school, I was there with Leon Benson.
Okay.
On WCAM, Camden School Scene. But yes, I often say Camden is really where it started. This right here is the music mecca. So we're just glad that we could be here and still talk about it. We will see you, and thank you for joining. Connie Jackson, myself, yours truly, Real Talk.